Lynn Patterson was driving home from work when her car ran out of petrol. Unfortunately for her, the Bernice saw her and picked her up. But this victim is a bit different from the other ones because they knew her. She was 31 years old, and a few weeks before, the Bernice helped her to change the
wallpaper and did a bit of painting and renovation work.
So she knew them, actually. But what happened with Nolene?
Well, this one obviously was a little different because the couple, and particularly David, already knew her. And Nolene was quite successful and was, by all accounts, considered to be quite attractive. She was a flight attendant with the Ansett Airlines, which are unfortunately now defunct, and was also working as a waitress and barmaid at the Nedlands Yacht Club, which was quite prestigious. And Nedlands Golf Club, which is in a very upmarket suburb of Perth, not far from Claremont, where Susanna Candy was abducted.
Nolene was kept for 3 days because David would keep, because David didn't want to kill her immediately because he had developed some sort of particular attachment to her because... whatever reason. Yeah, he had some particular attachment to her, and Catherine became extremely jealous of this woman, perhaps also because she was successful. But anyhow, Catherine eventually gives David an ultimatum. She picks a knife, put it in her own throat, and allegedly told David, "Choose, it's either me or her." And David complied. He chose Catherine, so he gave sleeping pills to Nolene, and when she was unconscious, was strangled. And later on, she was buried in a different place. It wasn't the Glenslade Park. She was...
Yeah, it was Glen.
Oh, I thought it was like the Pine place.
Drive a body to join the others at Glen Eagle Forest.
Oh, okay.
So Nolene was taken down to Glen Eagle Forest as well, and was put in the same area, buried in a shallow grave. What did Catherine do as a final send-off?
She picked some dirt and threw it in Nolene's face
as she was being buried.
She will later on say that she felt great pleasure at doing this. It's only 3 days later, November the 4th, that part-time computer operator and babysitter Denise Brown was also picked up in the Sterling Highway by the Bernice. She was a 20-year-old and accepted a lift from them, and the same way as the other girls, as soon as she was in the car, she got a knife in her throat, was bounded, and taken to the Bernice
and the Moorhouse.
And we know what happened there.
Yes.
She was taken to the Kangara Pine Plantation,
which is in the north of Perth, as compared to the Glen Eagle Reserve, where the other girls were buried. And however, this one went a little differently.
Very brutally indeed. Once she was taken there, she was alive. She was sexually assaulted by David once again, and she got strangled. No. She got stabbed. Believing that she was already dead, the Bernice were burying her, and she stand up in the grave, surprisingly. So David first hit her with a shovel and eventually stroke her. How do you say?
Bludgeoned her, I guess you could say.
Bludgeoned her with an axe and actually split the head in two. And this is when Catherine says that she got a bit squeamish about the crimes just because of the brutality that they had to use to murder this woman. But shortly after, they would kidnap their last victim on November the 9th, the only victim that escaped, the 17-year-old Kate Moore, who was hitchhiking along the Sterling Highway after a Sunday night with her friends.
It's not uncommon for people to go on what is known as the Sunday session. So up and down the Sterling Highway are a number of pubs and hotels and bars that you would meet up with friends, have a few beers, maybe have a few too many beers, just to send off the weekend, and particularly with young people, and get home and get ready for work on Monday morning. So this is a very long-standing tradition in Perth and still continues to this day. The Sunday session is really a part of life in Perth. So for Kate to be hitchhiking down Sterling Highway on a Sunday evening, a few sheets to the wind, as you'd say, is not unusual or would not be out of place.
She would actually said in an episode of a true crime series of Australia, which we're going to add the link to this episode, so you can all see it. She would say that she was almost picked up by a different car, but she saw that it was a car with only men, I think 4 or 5 men, and she didn't feel safe by getting in a car with only men. And then she saw this couple, the Bernies, and felt a bit more safe when she saw them. When she got into the car, she got a knife in her throat, and she would ask, "Are you going to rape me or kill me?" And David Burney replied,
"We'll only rape you if you're good."
So yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
She was taken to the Burney's house. They made her dance to a Dire Straits song, Romeo and Juliet, for 2 hours. She says that she was crying during the whole ordeal. They then watched the movie Rocky, and eventually she was chained to a bed and sexually assaulted. She noticed that Catherine was taking notes while the rape was taking place, and she would later on ask her what was she doing, and Catherine replied that she was taking notes to know what things aroused more David, so she could later improve the couple's sex life.
It was also later that night that Kate was provided with a pen and paper and asked to write letters excusing herself and saying goodbye to her family, to essentially provide another alibi for the Bernies, or more to the point, to recluse herself of any police investigations so they could essentially clock it up as another runaway being dissatisfied with their life and moving on, which at the time police and I think
would completely dismiss those cases, and it's something that still happens. Nowadays, police would be like, "Oh, it's just a teenager, maybe she ran away," even though their families would say otherwise. Precisely.
And that's it. Still, a lot of police procedure is you have to wait several days before you can officially report someone missing, especially if there's a note or a phone call, as unusual as it would seem and out of character. Although I think with the profiling and modern contemporary knowledge of and focus on vulnerable people, those procedures are changing now, where you can report them out of character, even an out of character disappearance, even if
you don't have to follow that silly procedure of waiting 24 hours of a missing person, because within that a person can be assaulted and murdered in less than 24 hours.
And by then the trail unfortunately will get cold. Yeah. So
the next morning of being kidnapped, David would go to his work. He would carry on his regular schedule and his regular life while they had this teenager chained to a bed. And at some point, the drug dealer of the Bernies knocks on their door. Catherine was there, taking care, quote unquote, of their victim. And she goes and answers the door. Kate somehow got loose of her chains. She was, attached to the bed, and she escaped through a window. But before leaving, and she was one very exceptional, brave girl, we have to say, she hid a couple of evidence of her kidnapping in the house. She hid a cigarette box. The Bernies had also given her some sleeping pills the night before, but she didn't take them. She hid them under her tongue.
And then stashed them under the mattress of the bed. And I think she also had a lipstick case or a lipstick container that she hid in the lounge room down the back of the couch.
And also a drawing or a phone number.
Her phone number.
Her phone number.
And written on a small piece of paper and hidden in the house as well, just to prove an evidence chain for the police to prove that she wasn't lying and that she could provide specific details of the house and where she had hidden.
She also knew David's real name because she saw the name on the bottle of the prescription drugs, because the Bernies would give a fake name. David would say that his name was John, which is funny because that was his father's name, and Catherine would say that she was Margaret, which was her middle name and was also David Bernie's mother's name. So Kate escaped through a window. She knocked on 4 houses before getting to a shop, a vacuum cleaning shop, and she would later describe herself as, quote, hysterical. I'm barefoot, wearing my black leggings, a black singlet, and no knickers. And she told, to the clerk or the employee that was in the shop that she was raped. And if a woman came to pick her and said or claimed to be her mother, that was a lie, that woman had kidnapped her. So she's taken to the police, and not surprisingly, after telling her horrible ordeal, the police didn't believe her initially. They were actually going to press charges against her for a fake assault. And it was only one a new policewoman called Laura Hancock, the one that pushed the detectives to investigate, actually. Kate Wood also said that the Bernies made her write a couple of letters to send to her family, claiming that, she had escaped like they did with the other victims. And it's at this point that some of the detectives actually start linking her case to the other ones, because at this point they weren't doing any sort of investigation on the other disappearances.
I mean, the Bernies had given them enough doubt with the letters and phone calls to the family to provide enough of a smokescreen. And
because the police sucks.
Yeah.
I have to say, all the prejudice of, a woman disappears, she escaped, she was a teenager, or, some of the victims weren't even teenagers.
Well, they were well and truly into their 30s and...
professional women with jobs and this and that.